Hello, everyone. My name is Chase. I'm one of the new design officers here, and today's topic is going to be teaching through level design. So the first thing I'm kind of going to ask, what does it mean to teach the player? Why is it our job? Why should we be teaching them? What are we teaching them? Those kinds of questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask these questions here. I'm not going to give you the answers just yet, but I just kind of want you to start thinking about them. So first off, why is it the designer's job to teach the player?
Are we answering these?
Yeah. So go ahead and throw out answers. I'm not going to tell you whether you're right or wrong yet.
Player is lost.
Okay. Well, why is it the designer's job? Why can't it be the programmer's or the writer's job or?
Because you have to figure out, as a designer, you have to figure out the best way and the most engaging way to present the skill that you're trying to teach. And it's not a programmer's job to do that because they're not involved in, they're involved in making the mechanic, they're not involved in teaching the mechanic.
Okay. Right. Any other suggestions as to why it's the designer's job?
Because as a game designer, your role is to design the experience that they have in the game. And so in order to develop this and make sure they have this experience, you need to show them what necessary things you need to know about, like how to play the game, and in order to experience that. And like it's not the programmer's job because they're focused on actually implementing these experiences, not on what these experiences should entail. And it's not the artist because they're doing art. And yeah, so it falls onto your role.
Okay. Yeah. What should we teach them? What does the designer teach the player? You know, what do we have to teach them? Can't they just play the game?
You have to teach them the basics of it, movement, if there's any special abilities that they might not, that they wouldn't fall into. So movement might not be one that you have to teach, because most games have some form of movement that's similar. Though if you have a different movement mechanic, you need to teach them that. But like different mechanics, picking up, if you have farming, if you have double jumps, it's important to point those out in teaching the players so that they don't limit themselves to what they think is their limits.
Okay. So you teach them various mechanics. All right. Any other answers to the question? Yeah.
I guess it's kind of what you kind of talked about in the workshop before, of that you're trying to show them all the tools that they can use, just so that they're not completely like they won't know how to if they to drink a potion unless they unless you show them like, oh, this is how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the idea of showing first, then giving them the tools to how to use those later on within the game.
Okay. And then how should we do this? How should we go about teaching the player? What's the best way to kind of go about doing this?
Giving them obstacles that use the mechanics.
Okay, giving them obstacles. Anything else? Yeah.
Showing subtle things in the environment to show like, oh, you can do this. Like I know there's one in Moonlighter where like in the walls of the building, there shows that you can roll over by pressing a button. That's an like inscription kind of thing to make it look like a part of the design of the building.
Okay.
Like so subtle hints.
Anything else?
You can do it more blatantly.
Yeah.
You can just have the keys on the screen that indicate what's happening, what's available to the player.
So, for example, this is a screenshot from base 6. It literally has very lightly on the ground here.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was because of the screen being a bad screen, like the TV being was
No. It's
burned.
not the TV's fault. Yeah, this is in the game. Lightly on the ground are the keys, along with some sort of symbol to kind of give you an idea of what that key might relate to. And ultimately, it just gives you all the keys so that you can press them and figure out what they do. All right. And when should we do this? When should we teach the player these various mechanics or whatever we're teaching them?
When needed, or when the ability or activity permits it. So at the very beginning of the game, movement. You teach them movement right off the bat. But then they eventually run into stick, and then you teach them how to swing the stick. Just when you get that ability.
Okay. Just kind of gradually throughout.
Or
Why not just throw everything at them at the beginning?
You might forget.
I forget. Okay.
And if they don't have the tool that they are trying to learn, they will definitely forget.
Mm-hmm. So in your example, if you taught them, hey, this is how you swing a stick, but they don't have a stick yet,
They're not going to remember.
they're not going to remember how to swing a stick.
When they get the stick, they won't remember how to swing the stick.
They might use it wrong because they don't have the stick.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And these are answers that we'll kind of flesh out throughout the rest of the workshop. I just kind of wanted to get you guys thinking in the right direction, I guess. So our first example is Super Mario Bros. So what are examples of things to teach the player? So in the context of Super Mario Bros, what is Nintendo teaching the player? What are the various
Jack.
things?
Shit.
Collision.
Okay, so you're saying that they don't actually teach the
They
player.
don't teach you anything. You
Okay.
just run.
Okay.
I mean, I suppose the Goomba teaches you gotta jump the Goomba. Don't touch the Goomba, it'll kill you.
Yeah.
And then, like you said,
Yeah,
collision with blocks.
It's teaching it through feedback. Like obviously, if you like hit the Goomba and nothing happens, you're gonna keep hitting the Goomba.
Right.
Unless that happens, then you know that it's bad.
There's a method. Triardon?
Try it out.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the Triardon method.
Yeah.
I remember watching a video on this, I believe, where in attempting to avoid the Goomba after they found out the Goomba is bad, you're supposed to accidentally hit the block right there, the question mark block, and find out that, hey, this question mark block will drop stuff. And then one of them is going to drop a mushroom, and you're like, well, shit, there's a mushroom, and because the Goomba also looks like a mushroom, you're going to try to avoid that mushroom, but because of the speed the mushroom's going at, it's going to land into you and realize, oh, hey, it makes me grow larger.
Okay. So that wasn't directly pertaining to that question, but yeah, the way the level is designed forces players to figure things out somewhat accidentally, you might say. They accidentally find out that these question mark blocks do things when you bump into the bottom of them. They accidentally find out that Goombas kill them. They accidentally find out that mushrooms are good things. Okay, so then that kind of answers the question, how does Mario Bros teach the player? How do they go about it? Do they specifically tell you, hey, avoid Goombas, or do they just let you kind of figure it out? This is kind of something that, yeah, go ahead.
You can't proceed to the level unless you jump over the Goomba.
Exactly, yeah. They force you to learn the mechanic in order to proceed. And this is kind of the core idea of teaching through level design. You design the level in such a way that you teach the player what they need to know to progress throughout the entire game. You teach the player that they have to jump, that they can jump. And granted, with a Nintendo controller, there are a lot less buttons than a computer keyboard. And so it's a lot easier to press the 8 or so buttons and figure out all the controls. Yeah. When does this teaching occur? These
When does Mario's teaching occur?
yeah
Throughout the game.
throughout the game.
Yeah.
Okay. So as things are introduced, they teach you how to deal with them.
Well, you die when trying to do them. They never
Teaching through failure.
Yeah, Mario never explicitly tells you how to run its game. Hence the reason that you have the tubes at the end of the underground level. I mean, that's just, you learn, you know how to play it through experiencing it.
Okay.
They don't even teach you that A, to get a jump, or B, or yeah, to go down to get into the tubes. That you just have to go through and experience it. Like, you have to figure it out on your own. And some of these are like accidental things, like jumping across a tube and your thumb slips and you hit down and you go down. You're like, oh. For me, a lot of the experience of Mario came from me playing from people before. So I learned from other people telling me how stuff worked.
Yeah. So obviously there was a different culture, game culture when Mario came out. Things were a lot more community based and social, and it's like, hey, have you heard of this game? Here's how you play. You have someone else to kind of teach you. But inevitably there had to be a first, right? There had to be someone who first had to learn the mechanics. The last question on the slide is kind of pointed, so I'll pose it to you guys, but I'm not expecting too much of an exact response. What do they avoid doing when they teach the players? What do they specifically avoid doing?
They don't really tell you what to do.
They don't tell you what to do.
Yes, so they avoid telling you like anything, honestly.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
don't
that
tell
was,
you to jump down.
Right. Yeah, that was the answer I was looking for. They avoid specifically telling the player what to do. And as we'll kind of see throughout a couple more examples, as a player, it's more satisfying to figure things out than to be told what to do. You don't want to be spoon-fed. You want to be able to figure things out and have validation. In the case of Mario, through trial and error.
But that's because it's simplistic. You can't do that with all games.
You can't do that with every game. There are games that you have to specifically tell people what to do.
Well, that's true. You can also do interactions. But there are other things that you can teach throughout the game. In this method, for example, was Half-Life 2 is a great example of this, because they do end up using a lot of.
Hey, no spoilers.
Okay.
We'll get there. We'll get to Half-Life. But yeah, there are a lot of games, and we will look at examples. We're looking at Mario. We're gonna look at Shovel Knight. We'll look at Half-Life, Hitman, and yeah, a lot of those. A lot of similar methods are used throughout these games, and are traditionally accepted as good game design, in the sense that they don't tell you what to do, they teach you what to do. Alright, next example is Shovel Knight. For those who have played Shovel Knight, what are examples of things that Shovel Knight teaches the player? Has anyone played Shovel Knight? Raise their hands. Okay, so we have a few.
When you attack something that looks like those dig spots, you can you dig instead of taking attack motion.
So when you attack
Or the thing where you shovel the thing out, it looks like attack
Yeah.
motion. It shovels out the ground.
Yeah.
Like that. And
So Shovel Knight, the name of the game is Shovel Knight, and in the
Exactly.
first level there's a pile of dirt.
Mhm.
There's a lot of telling you what to do without telling you what to do. You're a knight with a shovel, there's a pile of dirt, and the game is designed to be able to be played on a Nintendo controller. It has few enough mechanics that it can do that. And so ignoring the fact that this is typically, I mean, it's more likely to be played on a Xbox controller or a keyboard. You still only have a very, you have very few options with what you can do at this point in the game. Your options are jump, move, dig. That's basically it. And so by giving you something to try your shovel on, they teach you how to dig without telling you, hey, dig this up. And then down here, looking at the example with the enemies, coming from Mario, you might think, oh, I just jump on the enemies. But jumping on the enemies actually damages you, and you have to use your shovel. And it gives you an opportunity to do that in a location with minimal risk of dying or because there is a life bar, whereas with Mario you touch the Goomba and you lose, you die, you start over. When does this teaching occur?
Right at the start of the game.
Right at the start of the game? Okay. Alright. And keeping with the theme of other answers, as mechanics unfold, they will be taught when necessary. And then again, what does Shovel Knight specifically avoid in the way they teach the player?
Telling you what to do.
They don't spoon feed it to you.
They don't spoon feed it. They don't tell you, hey, use your shovel. There are no dialogue boxes. There's no text. And I think that's kind of one of the bigger things is that there's no dialogue. There's no specific words on the screen saying do this or you can use this. Which, I could give plenty of counter examples that do have these sorts of tutorials where they just tell you, hey, here are the mechanics. And I guess the question I would pose to you as designers is why not just do that? A lot of games do it nowadays, so why not?
Because people forget.
Because people forget. That was one of the reasons that we gave. If you give all of the mechanics right at the start, they're likely to forget. If you just tell them rather than making them use them, yeah.
It's more immersive this way.
More immersive. I would agree with
You're
that.
saying, but you're asking why they do it the other way, more so now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'm just saying, why would you choose one over the other?
Oh, I see.
Oh, okay.
And I guess with that, in that line of thought, why do people do it in a way that is more direct than doing it this way?
Because of the amount of options that you now have.
Amount of options.
There are so many buttons on a controller now. There are so many buttons on a keyboard. Like to go through. I do it all the time in games when I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like.
You just press every key
Yes,
until
just
something
press every
happens.
key to see what happens with every key.
That's valid. Yeah.
That's a problem I have with open world kind of sense because they have.
Oh yeah, like WoW and Guild Wars. I forget all the time what key does what, and so I have to do that. I'm like,
It also doesn't help that like
Character.
different games have different key bindings.
Yes.
So like one game where you right click stick to shoot, another game left click is to shoot, and you want to kill both the developers for being bad.
Okay, so a lack of standards, a lack of consistency when you have however many keys there are on a keyboard, I don't know off the top of my head. 26 letters plus 10 numbers plus shift control space. That's a lot. That's a lot of different options that you have, and standardizing that across many video games is difficult. So I guess you kind of have to kind of take that into consideration. Why would you do it one way over the other? Why do people do it the way that they do it?
As a designer, you don't want that standardization.
You want the option. You want freedom.
You want the option because then it allows you to do different things that you can avoid the standardization. It allows more fluidity in the way that you control. Maybe you don't want WASD to be your movement.
JKL.
IJKL.
IJKL.
Not even IJK. Like your movement is purely mouse clicks. Like there's a game that does something like that. I can't remember what it is.
League of Legends.
Yeah.
No.
Any mobile
There's one that you actually have to click your mouse in rhythms to move, or it.
Osu?
Which one?
Osu?
Crypt of the Necrodancer?
Yeah.
Crypt of the Necrodancer is not
No,
WASD,
like
those
mouse
are-
clicks though.
I don't
That's
know.
why he's
I haven't
like,
played.
following.
Crypt of the Necrodancer.
No, it's not a following thing. It's
Oh.
just like you press it and you move. Like it's
Feels like
Manual Samuel.
something
Manual Samuel?
kind of like but not manual Samuel. But anyway, you want to have the option of varied key binding so that your game has a different feel to it. You don't want to just beat Mario.
Right. Okay. Yeah, Luis.
I kind of lost track of the conversation, but we were talking about when do we present mechanics to the player, right?
We were talking about what do they avoid doing, which the answer was they avoid specifically telling the player how to play the game.
So when it comes to that, when I guess when those disappear as well,
Mm.
it's like for example, in the second gift that you have, we can clearly see that through the level, just because we have already like a higher altitude, the player can already know there's jump in this game, right? Implying that they had never jumped before. So the level structure can also guide the player without telling them. Something even better or going deeper is Metroidvanias, right? Metroidvanias are really good at this. If you start a game like Hollow Knight with all the controls already on it, it wouldn't be overwhelming, but it would be annoying to get used to all of them. So introducing them in a specific phase is nice because one, you can divide in different places on the level for it to last. Level design workshop we have, rewarding the player is a good way to keep them engaged. If you give the mechanics little by little, you keep the player constantly engaged, and it's like, oh wow, now I can do a double jump, oh wow, now I can wall jump, and you feel empowered, right? And then it's funny because now that when I play Shovel Knight, you should try to do this, like play a game while having like a design lens on. It's like I enter this part of Hollow Knight, and when you go down like a dungeon place, I could tell that, oh, I'm gonna get my double jump ability because there's no way for me to go out of this place unless I double jump. So the level structure can also like force the player to learn an ability. So in that respect, that is a big area. You couldn't get out of that area unless you get this new ability. So it's like it forces the player to get used to this new ability, and once the player gets out of this area, we know that they know how to use this ability because now they have surpassed this task.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like you said, engagement is a big thing, and in Metroidvanias especially, introducing mechanics is a great way to keep the player engaged, and while also not overwhelming them. So you're kind of doing two things with two birds with one stone, essentially.
There's cool things you can do with that, like for example, what's it called? Castlevania, Symphony of the Night, I think it was. It's a Metroidvania, but they actually give you all your abilities at the beginning of the game. And that's like an interesting example because it's kind of like doing the opposite of what we're talking about right now. But it's also to like get the player interested on here's all the abilities that you're gonna have. And as soon as you try some of them, the game takes them away from you. So it's like at the end of this game you're gonna have all these abilities, but for now we're gonna take them away from you. And you already know you have a goal. You want to collect all these abilities and you have an idea of how the game is gonna feel afterwards. Cool twist.
The game that I was thinking of was Dandara.
Okay.
You don't just move through, you aim,
Yeah, exactly.
and then you press a button and you jump to that point. And so
Okay.
it's more like trick shots-ish, but
Interesting. So yeah, standardization. Sometimes it's good to just have your stuff be WASD, and your players are able to walk up to your game and they try those keys and they're like, okay, this is movement. I know this. This is familiar. Sometimes you do want to try new things, mess around with different kinds of movement, like aiming and trick shotting your movement. That's the glory of game design, is that you have options. You are in control of the game experience, and that's something that's really interesting and really worth kind of thinking about and exploring. Is that?
It's a little bit of a question. It's kind of
Yeah.
like the idea of supporting for Shogun tells that I remember way more things when there's the experience of them happening of it, so I'll remember it way better because, like, for example, in Breath of the Wild, I remembered how to shift there because I wanted, there's this hill and I wanted to do it, and then when I did it, it kind of, you have the experience of having to do it, and then thus you want to keep doing it, and that's the thing in your mind that you keep coming back to. Oh, how do I do this? Oh, back to that memory. Same thing with other games like that, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. At the end of the quarter, I'm actually going to be doing a case study on Shovel Knight. And one of the, on that topic of, teaching through experience and you remember better, one of the final levels of Shovel Knight, well, each level in Shovel Knight introduces some new mechanic. Some sort of, whether it's underwater levels or there is, in the Pridemore Keep, there is a book that when you attack with your shovel reveals these blocks that are essentially pages that you then appear on the screen and allow you to progress through the next areas and then disappear after a while. Each stage adds some sort of fun mechanic, and near the end they start using multiple of these and all of these and calling back to previous mechanics that you haven't seen since that level, that very first level that you played, but you remember how to deal with them because you dealt with them before, and you remember because it was an experience and not just, hey, this is what this does. For sure. Yeah.
So if you're not specifically like telling the player like what buttons exactly to press, how would you get rid of like preconceived notions of like, oh hey, space is jump? Because like I once had playtested a prototype I made, and the jump was on W, and I had players say they were like dissatisfied because like jump wasn't on space and it was on W, which was kind of like weird for them. So like, how would you like solve that, like, the preconceived notions of the player?
Yeah, so that's an interesting design problem. How do you remove these standardized notions, such as WASD or using space to jump? How do you modify those in your game to be specifically the way that you want your game to, or you want your keybinds to be? It is an excellent question, and something that are those hands back there from the other design officers?
This is not your work. Actually, you can do it.
I'll go with Ryan because Luis has already talked today. So, what's your suggestion?
Luis also has a good answer for this question, but the first question I would be asking myself after that playtest is, why is it on W and why can't it just be on space? Right? Don't fight your player's expectations if you don't have to. If your player expects something and that thing is sufficient and functional, cool. One less thing I have to teach my player. We're going with what they're expecting.
Right.
If you have a good reason to fight the expectation, then that should come through.
Okay.
Right? W should wind up feeling like the right thing for the game. If not, I would really just put it on space.
Okay. Because I was that project I was working on was with another person, and we were actually arguing between W and space, and I just let him use W. Because I told him.
But now you have playtesting evidence to the contrary.
Yep.
It's not about what people on the team want. It's about what the game wants, and the game has spoken.
Yep.
The game is spoken.
Yeah. So, for those who couldn't hear on the stream or whatever, who are watching digitally, the answer was why are you fighting what the player expects? Why not just have space be on jump? Why is there a significant reason to have it on W? And if so, why does it feel dissatisfying? Why does it feel incorrect to have space or to have jump be on W instead of space? So yeah, that's definitely a case by case kind of thing that you have to look at. Thank you for your.
I should also feel like when I'm talking about this topic, I need to say the word affordances, because that's actually what this concept is called. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for your fourth year insight. Any other questions before we continue on the slideshow? let's move on. So what about Base 6? This is a game that I actually worked on in fall quarter. My first game as a designer, my first game project in VGDC. And so I posed the questions to you. I don't expect any of you to have played it, so I'll kind of answer the first couple. What are examples of things to teach the player? Well, if you look here on the starting screen, this is the first screen that the player sees after walking outside of their house. So inevitably they will see these controls, Q and then a bottle symbol, shift and then an arrow symbol, space and a sword symbol, enter, E, a sort of chat box symbol. So these are a few of the mechanics, not all of them necessarily, but it gives you the idea, okay, there's a dash if I press shift, which is what is being demonstrated on the first GIF. If you were to press space, there would be a sword slash. If you were to walk up to the NPC at the top and press enter or the E key, that would be an interact and you would receive dialogue. And if you were to press Q, you would drink a potion or gain health. So then, just looking at it, how does Base 6 teach the player these mechanics?
It's blatant.
It's blatant. Specifically tells instead of showing or experiencing. Okay. When are we doing this? When does the teaching occur?
Right at the very beginning, right when the game starts.
Right when the game starts. It gives you all these various mechanics. And this second GIF is in the first dungeon. It has a pit in the middle of the room that you can't progress past. And then that same arrow symbol to call back to the shift that represents dash. So if a player were to walk into this room and see, oh, there's that arrow symbol, that reminds me of when I was on the starting screen and trying out the dash. It calls back to that experience and allows them to use it in a new way that teaches through showing instead of telling. So this version of teaching occurs as necessary, as a new obstacle is introduced that the player has to overcome using a specific mechanic. So then the question, is it bad that we told instead of showing? Is it bad that we specifically told the player, hey, these are the mechanics, these are the controls, instead of either introducing them gradually or showing them in a different way, in a way similar to how Mario or Shovel Knight taught the player? Yeah.
I mean, it goes back to the idea that you gave them the tools at the very beginning, but then as you went along, you kind of gave little guidances or demonstrations on how to do it as well. You told first at the beginning, but at the same time, you still let them get the idea, like, you never took the control away from the player in that sense. You didn't make them stop when they when they reached the symbol of the shift thing. You made them shift, and you saw like the click of the shift or something. I don't know. You didn't take the control away from the player. You let the player do what he wanted when he saw those things, and if he chose to saw those or not, it was his decision to. And when he saw those symbols, he made the decision of like, oh, like if people who didn't read those get to look at that. So it's that mix of both, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, there's kind of a mix of telling and showing. And this isn't, I'm not looking for a specific answer here. I'm just kind of asking, based off of the previous examples and kind of what we talked about in the benefits of teaching through showing and the benefits of teaching through telling. Do you think this is bad? How could it be better? How could we have done this better? And I won't take it personally. Like I said, this was my first VGDC project. I was unfamiliar with the specific concept of kind of show, don't tell. So how could this be better? How could we have done this in a different way? Especially for those of you who have played the game. How is this perfect game design? Is this game design at its pinnacle, or are there kind of different things that we could have done that would have been better, more intuitive, more akin to the kind of slow, gradual introduction of mechanics. Yes.
Someone who has played it, I did really do enjoy it. He gave me the shift one, at least at the beginning. I don't know about the potions or other stuff, because I just wanted to be able to move faster into the game, because that was my own experience. I like to go through it quickly, go through the explore faster, so when having those tools, it was better for me. Yeah, because there's a lot of things that you can always just explicitly tell out of the game into the game sometimes, so sometimes you wouldn't need to tell. But yeah, I guess I'm not sure. Other than how could it be doing it better, would be probably. No, I have nothing in mind so far. Yeah, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I'm just asking in general. What do people think? Just an example that.
Doing it in the sense of, so space. Doing it when it was needed. So if that's the first time that you use the shift to jump across,
Yeah.
point out that shift. Jump across there. That's the. I mean, the arrows are fine that it's a key recognition, but if you haven't had to use it yet, don't tell them then.
But the problem is, personally, for people like me, where I like to move things and have tools to get faster. And if I'm like, oh, shift did this, and then I didn't have to do it. I got to shift through the game a lot,
Yeah,
It
so.
makes the game go faster.
But I like moving. I like I guess I enjoy it as a player who kind of usually do that.
Luke.
It probably would have been better if the arrows were facing the same direction, so that any confusion from the directionality of shift would be lost. So if that whole room was flipped on its side, and so it would be easier to recognize the shift arrow as the shift arrow instead of a house or something, which there may be ways, because the first time I played that game, I was like, oh, that's a house, and I didn't realize that that was the button that I was supposed to press. So that making the symbol that is very important to the game a little bit more recognizable in that point where you actually getting taught what to do with it.
Okay, so because the shift symbol wasn't facing the same direction, it was a little bit
There's
more confusing.
A slight amount of ambiguity, which most people probably wouldn't affect them, but like one or two people might go, oh, I don't understand what's going on due to that slight amount of ambiguity.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's something that we haven't really talked about, ambiguity. Yeah, when you teach game mechanics, you want to kind of tread the line between literally telling them what to do and letting them figure it out on their own. You need to give them enough of a nudge to be able to figure it out, but not so much that they feel their hand is being held. And having too much ambiguity and just kind of leaving them to figure things out on their own. And I never want to say it's a bad thing. Maybe that's exactly what you want for your game. That's one of the big problems of design. Is it bad? And we talked about, is it bad to show an experience versus literally telling them. We went over the pros and cons of doing both, and why they're both. Neither is inherently a bad thing. It just depends wildly on what your game is. And so yeah, it's just kind of another design problem to kind of think about. What are the costs and benefits of doing something a specific way? Any other questions or comments before we move on? All right, let's move on. But wait, there's more. So we talked about introducing the core mechanics. Those are the kind of things that we introduce at the start of the game. For Mario Bros, that's moving left and right and jumping. For Shovel Knight, that's moving, jumping, using your shovel to dig and to attack enemies. Those are kind of the main, like the core mechanics of the game. But what about the mushroom or the question mark block? As Victor had said previously, it's designed in such a way that there is a high chance of the player accidentally bumping one of these blocks or bumping them out of curiosity. In this specific case that I show on the screen, if the player thinks the mushroom block is an enemy, the level is designed in a way that makes it very difficult to avoid the mushroom. If you try to jump over it, you're going to get bonked back down and run into it and discover, oh, this is actually a helpful thing and not a harmful thing. And there are a lot of examples of this just right here at this beginning part that we kind of went over. Yeah, go ahead.
Not to mention you're not punished for treating it like an enemy either, because like if you jump on it, then like it doesn't like kill it like it would an enemy. So because of that, like you'll receive the buff whether or not you treat it as an enemy or not.
Yeah, absolutely. It introduces it in a way that is the least punishing way possible, so to speak. Which is one of the best ways to teach new mechanics, is in a space that, well, not, I guess I shouldn't say necessarily best, but it is one of the better ways to teach mechanics, is through a safer location where enemies maybe aren't as threatening, where they give you kind of like the first foundational bits and then increase difficulty and force you to use things in new and creative ways. Using Portal as an example, with Portal you learn the basics, like, oh, if I put a portal down and I jump into it, I'm going to come out with a lot more momentum and velocity, and I'm able to launch myself better. And other similar examples of things building on themselves, introducing a new mechanic, building on that, combining the two. And so yeah, we should introduce mechanics. I guess that's the question. When should we introduce new mechanics? How often? When should this happen?
Every 10 seconds.
Every 10 seconds, a new mechanic. Put that on the good bad idea board.
Every time you get to use these. I guess it would be whenever they feel like they've reached a milestone, and you as a designer say, oh, they've reached this point, time to give them something like a reward, that you are playing better. Here's something to give you something more power, or you're going to try something else. I guess one good example relating to Mario would be if you kept yourself alive while having the mushroom up, and you hit a power block, you don't get another mushroom, but you get a fire power.
Yeah.
And that's the idea of you encourage it when they reach a point or a milestone, saying, hey, you played good. Here's a reward for that.
Yeah. So at certain points, and this is kind of a judgment call, but at a certain point when a player has gained an amount of mastery over the mechanics that you've given them, that's probably when it's most appropriate to introduce a new mechanic. Giving the example of, if you stay alive long enough, if you stay big long enough in Mario, and you hit another power-up block, it doesn't give you another mushroom, it gives you a fire flower. And that is a new mechanic that gives you even more ability and agency within the game. What if the player doesn't get the mechanic the first time around? How do we deal with that as designers? What if the player walks into the dungeon and sees a house icon and just sits there? How do we fix that?
Called Luke. Luke.
What?
Oh, you really got roasted.
I guess it'd be like still making the game still accessible to the players that don't get those power-ups. I guess a good example would be like Mega Man, right? Where like even if you don't use the other power-ups in the game, you could still beat most enemies with the Mega Buster, things like that. You could still play Mario without any power-ups whatsoever. You still make the game still accessible, even if those power-ups don't change like the accessibility of the game, but only just give you more fun, I guess, with it.
What about
There are games that you can't do that. though.
yeah? What about
Unless
what about
you can.
Metroidvanias where you need certain mechanics in order to access the next area of the game? How do you deal with that? How do you teach the player how to use this new mechanic?
And what if they don't get it?
And what if they don't get it?
Probably gonna drop your game.
I,
Like
there's no.
for Metroidvanias, beyond the room that you're in and explaining it, there's not much that you explaining it in the room. That's there are so many Metroidvanias that I've stopped playing, come back to, forgotten how to play, and I'm just like, I can't do this because I don't remember which button combination I'm supposed to
That's
use.
a mood, honestly. Oof.
I think, I mean, keeping with the theme of Metroidvanias, I think Ori and the Blind Forest does something that's very smart to address this, which is, instead of having their controls like somewhere that's like hidden deep within like everything, they show every single ability that you've locked on the pause menu, and you can scroll over it to see what the control for it is, and it tells you what it does. So it's both, in that way it becomes both sort of like a collectible experience, like I'm collecting all of these abilities, so it enhances that because you can visually see how many abilities you're currently missing, and it shows you what the controls are, so it also has a practical purpose, so I think that's really smart.
Alright, so just kind of in these examples, you're saying that it is okay to tell the player that this is what this does.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some cases it's not really feasible to just have it always be exploring and like, oh, you learned that way, because like there's always the case of, oh, I put this game down and then I come back and I'm probably not going to go through all of the prior stuff again necessarily, right? Like even if it is a Metroidvania, even if it is about exploration, I may or may not go back to the only area where I might be able to learn that mechanic to the best of my ability. Even so, I should be able to have some method of getting that knowledge back, and I have the muscle memory, I just don't happen to know like what button it is right now.
Okay.
So like at the very least, I think there should be a method to at least tell you how to perform those tasks, but obviously it shouldn't be the main thing you rely on. Because nobody plays a game to, or at least I hope no one plays a game to like read a textbook, but people play D&D, so forget everything I just said. That doesn't apply.
People play Pathfinder.
Papers, please, people. That's a fun one, right?
It's fine, Pathfinder's not a video game, so obviously the design principles don't apply, right?
Oh, visual novels.
Oh no. How do I read
Visual
the
novels are
controls
not
for
really-
visual novels? Click.
But yeah, let's ask the same question but with Shovel Knight. We add a new mechanic. You can jump on dirt blocks. How do we teach that to the player?
By giving the dirt block in a safe environment.
Safe environment,
Yeah.
okay.
Not only that, but your normal attack to get rid of dirt blocks is no longer in range.
Yeah, so as the top gift shows, yeah, you can't dig. You can't dig these dirt blocks up. You have to be able to, you have to learn how to jump on them. What if the player doesn't get that?
They have then they.
What if we make it so that you have to jump? Like the left one there, I believe, like it would force you to jump on it. The one on the left, because like literally, if you walk next to it, then you would be pushing it in the face, and you're like, oh, well, I've solved this problem before. How do I get over this block? Well, I jump. So then your natural instinct is to jump, and then you land on the block, and then it breaks. It's like, oh, well, I can jump on these.
So in order to actually break these blocks, you do have to press down after jumping.
Okay.
So slight difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just landing on the block itself does not break it. You have to point your shovels downward.
Okay.
How do you teach the player that you have to jump and then press down? And
You just wait for him to
wait
figure
for them to figure it out.
Patience.
I think
Yes, you do.
a safe environment is probably one of the most important ways to do this.
If anything, the first dirt block on the left kind of tells you that your shovel can't destroy these. Just there might be other ways of doing so.
Yeah, these. This isn't the first time that these dirt blocks appear. They do just appear kind of randomly, not as like real obstacles, but they do appear and give you the opportunity to go, oh, maybe I can use my shovel on these because they've already introduced the shovel mechanic.
How do you introduce the jumping down mechanic though? How do you introduce jumping and then pointing downwards?
Yes, the
Like-
question, how do you introduce specifically jumping and then
I
pressing
think
down?
the kind of funnel design kind of entails that.
Mhm. So funneling the player to where they can't progress without learning this.
And I find it better that they have 2 blocks there instead of 1, because if you had 1, then you could miss that, miss
Yeah.
using it. And
Mhm.
if you hold down, hit the block, and not even realize that you had to hold down to get rid of the third block, then it's better to have 2, because then you see the feedback from the first one, and then the second one you really notice it.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's actually that's a question that I hadn't even thought of. Yeah, they have 2 dirt blocks there, so that if you miss the feedback on the first one, it kind of gets your attention, and it really it lets you know that this is the right move on the second dirt block. It gives you 2 chances to kind of really take it in, and also the idea of multiple bounces, that you can bounce off one dirt block and then bounce off another dirt block. Yeah, it gives you opportunities, and then I believe in the very next room there is a bubble that kind of just floats in the air that you can only progress by bouncing off of, and it deals damage to you if you don't put your shovel down and bounce off of it, if you just run into it. So
Can you shovel down to kill bugs?
you can shovel down to kill bugs, yes. So you can also attack, you can kill most enemies in the game by jumping on them and having your shovel down.
It's a good thing to know when I play the game.
Um,
Not
yeah.
having to shovel.
So I haven't played this, but going back to the shovel down to kill enemies,
Mhm.
another thing we might be able to do is to put a bunch of those enemies, assuming the player already knows that they can shovel down and kill things, because we've established that the shovel can kill things if you dig, right? Because I think we saw that on a previous slide. But after that, if we put a bunch of dirt blocks around, then it might be inevitable that they just invariably land on one at some point, in which case they would learn the mechanic.
Yeah. Yeah, and that same idea of having to jump off of enemies in order to progress does come up, where there are large gaps that can only be gotten over if you time a jump on an enemy. Which is why I really want to do a case study on Shovel Knight as an entire game and look at all of the different places where they do these very specific things and teach the player very specific things, but that the player is intuitively able to walk up and just do because they know what's in their toolkit, and they have very limited responses to specific situations because they can only do a select number of actions. Henry?
I know there was the way to there was a way they did the mastery for this in the Spectre Knight stage, I think, where there was the bushes where you attack the shovel and they come
Mhm.
up. When you jump on the down stab, they propel you forward, but they fall down, kind of thing. And by using those mix of those things you learned in the first level that you did, they kind of encourage you now with the mastery of doing down stabs even better, I guess, which is interesting, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't-
absolutely.
Which is reinforcing the player to remember it consistently.
Yeah, there are these in each stage there's a new mechanic, and in one of the stages there's a bush that you can hit with your shovel and that flies up, and then if you do this kind of bounce jump off of it, it allows you to reach even higher heights. And so there are just these different versions of essentially the same thing. There's another hand.
And a question that we ran into is how do they know that they have to press the down button to get it to go down? And I think some things are a little bit more intuitive than others. I want to go down, and so I'm pressing the down button. That doesn't work, and so I jump and I press the down button, and now my shovel's below me. And so the shovel so far is my attacking thing, and so my shovel being below me while I'm pressing down and in the air means that I'm probably going to be attacking down. And so the extra button input of pressing down can be kind of informed intuitively, and you can kind of go with your intuition as long as you temper it with playtesting.
Oh, you
And-
this is really good.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So when it comes to that, I feel like the level actually makes that intuitive for the player. If we think of the levels as stories, and the story of this little piece, right, it's I'm wanting the player to jump and press down to use the shovel, right? So it's nice when you're looking at these type of levels to think a bit of why didn't they do it other ways. So what if we didn't have these two parts in here and we only had the two cubes, right? We still get the double feedback. But why do we have this part, right? Why do we have this square in here? I think someone brought up this square part. I think it was Oscar. And yeah, so this first square, right? It makes the player wants to hit it, right? So in your head, even if you're not thinking about it behaviorally, because usually with the best levels, you make things through behavior and physical reaction of players, cognitive, than actually like them thinking about it. So in this point, you already have them, I can hit these blocks. But the key is these squares in here, because now the player has to jump. So though in their head, it's like, you're basically, this story is two actions, right? Jumping and hitting. This is basically the same story, but separated. This is the jumping story, and this is the hitting. And then it's perfectly combined here.
Yes, they give you essentially both of the ingredients. Hitting dirt blocks being the first ingredient. There's a dirt block there that you can hit with your shovel. The second ingredient is jumping. They force you to jump right beforehand. So both of those are fresh in your mind at the moment that you are encountering this new obstacle. And the player's response is to combine the two. And with the limited controls, I think limited controls is one of the main things that these kind of, both Mario Bros. And Shovel Knight rely on in terms of teaching, is that you only have a select number of inputs that you can give. This is just something, obviously this is a very specific example, but the same general idea can be applied to any of our games that we're making. The question does arise when you add more and more controls and more options for inputs, but the same general idea: give the player the ingredients, and then kind of let them apply those. Any other questions? Comments? Compliments?
You're pretty.
Thanks, Keegan. You too.
Your voice is amazing.
You're reaching Keegan levels of voice, or you're already at Keegan levels of voice sometimes.
Keegan levels of voice?
Yes.
Apparently, I am a new voice level. I don't know.
I'll take it. Thank you for your compliments. So yeah, let's move on. So yeah, let's revisit this slide with the questions that I posed at the beginning. Why is it the designer's job to teach the player? From what you've seen just kind of in the past few slides, why is it our job?
Because it is our job as a designer to create these experiences and stories, and so we must also take charge in designing how we want to introduce mechanics and teach the player how to engage with our game and stay engaged.
Yeah, it's our job to create the experience, and the experience has to include the experience of teaching and being taught. And it's also, granted, in larger corporations there are different kinds of designers, but in the club there are going to be, primarily you're going to be doing a lot of different kinds of design. And so you're going to be not only designing mechanics, but also designing the levels. And when you have that freedom to be able to design mechanics and levels, you also have the ability and kind of requirement to use the levels to teach those mechanics. Yeah. What are we teaching the player? What are the things that we're teaching them? And you guys kind of got this the first time around, but I just kind of want to reinforce it.
The tools so that they can progress.
For success.
Yeah.
You give them the tools, the tools of the game.
Controls, mechanics.
Just like
UI.
Lesnar just taught us.
Controls
all
and
about
mechanics.
it.
Yeah. You teach them, essentially, you teach them the what, but not the how. You teach them what they're able to do.
To some extent, you can show them like techniques, or give them a challenge where they must incorporate a technique with these mechanics. But
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you show them how by giving them opportunities to kind of explore and experiment with things. Yeah, how should we do it? And this is kind of an interesting question based off of the conversation we had. Is there one specific right way to do it, or is there a way that's better than others? How should we go about teaching the player?
Depends on the platform, depends on your game.
Depends on the
If you
genre.
have a limited amount of actions, you can get away with doing less. But if you have a series of different things that your character can perform, your player can perform, they're going to need instruction. Otherwise, they're going to get confused about what do I do when.
Also, looking into what your audience is. Are you looking for younger kids or older people? Are you aiming for people who've played only 80 games from the 90s or something like that? Are you only looking for people who are playing games very, very recently? Kind of looking into how that translates into what kind of design of game you want. Because there are people who have like that old context of games. Does that apply to anything? That's like kind of like Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight was a game for people who've played old NES games or played that, so that people who are older audiences can figure out. It's like, oh, I can play this, and I have been fun enjoying it, and it's not too overwhelming for their own senses. Especially for age as well, because like younger kids may not know these kind of things, and you have to teach it differently to them.
Yeah, so teach different things depending on your target audience. The player should always be in your mind. You should always be thinking of what would the player be doing, how would the player react to this. Your target audience as a designer should be something that is influencing every decision that you're making throughout the course of your design. Yeah.
I think that also kind of goes into like knowing knowing your affordances, like what like what Ryan said. Knowing like, oh hey, this demographic probably will have played like a lot of games where it's WASD to move, so let's make it WASD, unless you have a good reason to do it, to not do it that way.
What's interesting is I know you talked about this before, but making a game based that doesn't really have a tutorial, but it's based off the other games that you've played in your past life. Is that an interest? I wonder if that's an interesting game concept in that sense, because you elaborated on that. I'm curious, and now that how does that work?
How does having other games influence your?
Like a game that doesn't have any tutorial, but every single thing that you know in that game is applied from other games you've played in your past.
So essentially,
yeah.
Other games that you've played are the tutorial for your game.
You said that. I think you've said this to me before, so I was curious about it. But yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of
Is that feasible?
interesting questions that we don't technically have the answers to. Game design is a new field, and there are a lot of questions and not a ton of answers. But yeah, that being said, there are a lot of interesting topics to be thought about and be brought up. Kind of on the topic, on the topic of things that we've talked about. In base 6, we have both enter and the E key as an interact button. Originally it was just enter, but we had enough playtesters say, I'm familiar with the E key being interact, that we added it as a secondary option. And I think that is a kind of really specific and really good example of affordances. And the example that you gave with having jump be W instead of space is another big example of that. Is there a specific reason why it shouldn't be this way? No, there's no reason to not have E be interact as well. So, yeah, just things to think about. And as always, playtest, playtest, playtest. Yeah.
I think one potential reason where why maybe you might not want space to be jump is, let's say that was attack. And so if space was attack and you had your right hand on the mouse for some reason, then suddenly I think there might be a reason where you might want space as attack and W to jump if you're not going to be like doing anything with that. So I guess that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Depending on the number of mechanics you have, it's really up to you where you put those on the keyboard, where you decide those inputs should be, and where you think they would be most intuitive. And a lot of that idea of things being intuitive ties directly into affordances and what players are used to. Did you have an aha moment?
No, I was wondering if you make an O-soup like platformer thingy where they like things come at you and you like they shoot out the thing, and when you go over the mouse, instead of clicking on them, you press the letter that was like associated with their thing on it. So it's like Q, and then there's a Q enemy coming towards you, kind of like a mix of like typing of the dead and also a thing. I don't know. Yeah, it was just interesting.
Yeah, so it's worth thinking about how you would do certain combinations of game mechanics and where you would place those on the keyboard, and thinking about what would be best in the eyes of the player, what would be most intuitive. I think we've covered pretty much everything, right? Any other questions or anything that anyone wanted to bring up before we move on? Let me check my time real quick. Yep, I went over. So, at this point, the workshop is officially over. I still have a couple videos that if you want. I don't think there are any workshops immediately in the near future. Not until like 6, right?
Until like 6, yeah.
So I'm just gonna take this time to we can watch through these and discuss them. Huh? 20 minutes? We can get through the first one. We'll get through the first video and we'll talk about it because I promised that we would talk about Half-Life.
You did promise.
I did promise.
I was waiting. There was no Half-Life.
There was
Half-Life is right.
I want Half-Life 7.
Hi, this is Mark.
That's gonna be really loud.
Chase, are you still recording?
I am.
Oh, okay.
Should you be recording?
Yeah.
Can you record YouTube videos? Is that against the rules?
Might be.
Oh yeah, that's again the thing.
Probably kill the recording.
Just be safe.
Yeah, let's
Just
cut
be
it.
You're still to watch the video today.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I'll put the links back up. Go check out these videos. They are super useful and I had fun watching them. For those who are joining us digitally, thank you, and make sure to smash that like and subscribe.